Okay, so we had an interesting update this week to the PlayStation Portal, which is basically a streaming client device for the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Professional. Literally haven't touched my Portal since the review period, and yeah, I wasn't particularly taken with it. It's an interesting thing, the Portal, because it's a self-contained device. There's no sort of HDMI outputs on there. There's, you know, ultimately any sort of reviewing of it, getting objective data is that much more difficult. But the bottom line is that it was very laggy. Image quality wasn't great. There were stuttering issues with it, which is a shame because the screen is actually quite good, and it's a full DualSense controller there. Effectively, it's quite an interesting device. Actually, I'm just going to take this question first of all from supporter Skyrim Super Championship Turbo Edition 2. Again, he's missed hyperfighting. But did the latest PlayStation Portal firmware bring the rumoured fixes to stutter and a higher bitrate? Also, does PS5 Pro stream to the Portal at a higher quality than PS5 Amateur? Despite its limitations, the Portal seems to nicely target the gamer dad demographic, who can't hog the TV like they did in their younger years. Is it finally a product any of the DFT would willingly buy? I actually booted up the Portal this morning. The big feature update, which isn't actually in this question, concerns the PlayStation Cloud streaming solution. So basically, if you have like a particular tier, I think it might be the high-end tier, you can actually stream PlayStation 5 games from the cloud. And Tom looked at it, and actually the quality was good. It was a 4K stream. Latency wasn't quite as good as Xbox, but the visual quality was streets ahead. The deficit being that you could only run it on a PlayStation 5. No longer. You can actually run it on the PlayStation Portal now. The cloud gaming functionality runs on the Portal. It's really interesting in that initially I didn't actually see it. I did the update to the Portal. I couldn't actually find the feature. Turns out you need to go to the Portal's settings menu and actually enable it because it's a beta test at the moment. So you have to enable the beta. You restart the Portal and then basically you get the choice to stream from your PlayStation console or to stream from the cloud. So at this point, the Portal becomes a device that you don't necessarily need a PlayStation for, although the concepts that you would be subscribing to PlayStation Plus without a PlayStation would be quite extraordinary. But let's talk about the cloud streaming. It does work. You're not getting a 4K stream. It is a 1080p stream. It does work. I played Control on it. I played it in performance mode. Interesting stuff. Altogether more interesting when you actually leave the cloud streaming beta and then go to the normal PlayStation 5 streaming. I ran it from the Pro and then ran Control from the local console. Now, there's a lot of subjective analysis here, impressions, because it's actually really difficult, as I said, to get objective metrics from this device. So let's go back to Skyrim Super Championship Turbo Edition 2's question here. Does it bring rumoured fixes to stutter and a higher bitrate? Higher bitrate, can't say. It does still stutter. There'll be plenty of people telling you it doesn't, but Control in its performance mode, 60 frames per second, is pretty much locked. But if you just start in a very simple room and just spin the camera, you'll start to see that there are occasional jumps, hitches. Increase the speed of the rotation of the camera, and those stutters will become more noticeable. Now, the interesting thing here is that those stutters occurred both with cloud gaming streaming and also with streaming from the console. And it seemed to be pretty much the same.
Wow.
Now, is that a remote play issue? Because I don't think Tom picked up on that in his analysis. So maybe I actually have to do a bit of testing on that to see whether it happens on the PlayStation as well. But I don't think it does. Otherwise, I guess Tom would have picked it up. The quality level seemed to be much the same. The latency actually seemed to be a bit higher on the cloud, as you would expect, because it's not local, which is interesting because Tom's tests for latency on cloud streaming were actually lower than the Portal. So maybe there is some sort of problem with the portal, or some sort of latency added by the portal. But that seems to be my sort of take on it. It's really interesting that now the cloud streaming is actually open to more devices, even if it is a relatively lower subset. The image quality is still noticeably a stream. You know, we're not dealing with like Moonlight. I mean, Oliver loves that on his ROG Ally, right? You know, it's pretty much flawless.
Yeah, yeah. With the Ally, it is a really good experience there, and of course, there you can do 1080p 120 quite easily. Get that higher refresh rate, get that lower latency. I mean, the latency perceptibly is pretty much the same as local, very comparable, the same as to what you would get with a fully local experience there. From what I've seen with GeForce Now, that's also quite a good experience. To me, the PlayStation streaming is probably not good enough in terms of having a really good image with good latency and minimal, if not non-existent, stutter issues there. But yeah, for me, kind of like the threshold for, at least maybe this is too high of a threshold perhaps, but for me the threshold for a streaming experience to be good is if I almost can't tell, or indeed really kind of can't tell, that it is a streaming experience, then I'm kind of pleased with it. And perhaps that's too high of a bar. But for me, my various experiments with the PlayStation streaming service and with xCloud have not come particularly close to meeting that bar. So I do think they need to get better. They do need to improve there. But I think streaming is, I mean, I've certainly become a lot warmer to streaming now that I've seen exactly what it can be at its peak, because that dream of PC or console level gaming on a handheld, you're never really going to get there unless you play games that are 5 or 10 years old with a device like the Steam Deck. So getting that functionality in a really low power handheld platform, or even a phone, that's right. A really cool experience if you can get everything working right, which hopefully Sony is trying to improve there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, going back to the question, is it finally a product any of the DF team would willingly buy? I do like the concept that we would unwillingly buy it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that does happen when we need to buy something to test for the channel.
Oh, yeah.
But I still don't think it's particularly great. You can definitely feel the latency in Control, for example, when you're just moving the camera about with the right stick. And, it's much cleaner and better on the actual home console. I just don't really recommend it. And I think it could have been a lot better, but I think it's just, there are inherent weaknesses with remote play. The cloud streaming thing is certainly interesting, but there is lag there too. The fact that it's in any way comparable to a local device is astonishing. The local experience should be a lot better simply by virtue of the fact it's running on the same network. And just to make it clear, the portal is obviously Wi-Fi only, but I was connected with my PS5 Pro hardwired to the router or the router, and it was still not great, so I wouldn't willingly buy it. No. I don't suppose you got any real thoughts about this. Streaming is just completely off the table for you, right, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've said before that I think my mobile experience is one that I would reserve for games that are like turn-based or something like that. That's where I find it like a compelling experience, because I'm not concerned about fidelity, input latency doesn't really matter. Smoothness for most 2D turn-based games is, some of these games run at 30 FPS, etc. Like smoothness is already off the table. Yeah. So my use case would be very different. But what you describe about the lack of smoothness when just turning the camera, that's an immediate turn off. I could not even use the device.
To be clear, it's kind of like an occasional blip as opposed to a constant stutter. And to be fair, I reckon most people probably wouldn't notice it. Now, the question is it improved over the launch? Now, the issue is that we've got no data from the launch because there's no way to capture the portal.
Right.
I guess I could take a look at the Remote Play app on PC to see if that has improved, because I still think fundamentally it's just Remote Play. There's nothing special about this device. It's just running a Remote Play client. and there's a remote play client on PC, so maybe it would be the same. Increased bitrate, again, you just don't have the visibility there. I suppose you could do some network traffic testing, but there's a lot going on my network, so I'm not sure how we'd do that. But no, I don't really recommend it, to be honest. But I think, the people that like it, and there were plenty of people who seemed completely oblivious to the issues. Well, it's still good for them, I guess.